Mankind has always been captivated by the idea of lost treasure. Not just the glint of gold or the sparkle of jewels, but the stories they carry. These are not mere objects of wealth, but tangible links to the past, holding the ambitions, the power, and the secrets of civilizations that have long since turned to dust. They are the final missing pieces of a grand historical puzzle. Our journey takes us through the annals of three of the world's most formidable empires: Rome, Byzantium, and the Ottoman Sultanate. These colossal powers dominated vast swathes of the globe for centuries, accumulating wealth on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend today. Their coffers overflowed with the spoils of conquest, the profits of trade, and the tributes of subjugated nations. Yet empires fall. Cities are sacked, palaces are burned, and dynasties are overthrown. In the chaos of these world-changing events, fortunes are lost. Some were plundered and scattered to the winds. Others were hidden in haste, their owners never to return. And some simply vanished, slipping through the cracks of history, leaving behind only whispers and legends. Using historical chronicles, archaeological discoveries, and expert analysis, we will delve into the legacies of this lost wealth. We will reconstruct the stories behind legendary artifacts and monumental hoards. And we will ask the most tantalizing question of all: where might these incredible treasures lie hidden, waiting to be rediscovered? The gilded cage of Rome. To speak of Roman wealth is to speak of the wealth of the known world. For centuries, the Roman Republic and later the Empire acted as a colossal engine, systematically drawing resources from three continents into a single glittering center. The gold of Spain, the grain of Egypt, the silks of the East, and the captured treasures of 100 different cultures all flowed towards the city of Rome. The scale of this fortune was put on public display. When Emperor Trajan conquered the kingdom of Dacia in modern-day Romania, he brought back over 165,000 kilograms of gold and twice that in silver. The subsequent celebrations in Rome lasted for 123 days. This was not an isolated event, it was the Roman way. Triumphal parades saw generals parading carts overflowing with golden statues, precious gems, and priceless works of art seized from defeated enemies. This wealth funded the most ambitious engineering projects the world had ever seen. Aqueducts that carried water for hundreds of miles, a network of roads that bound the empire together, and public arenas like the Colosseum, a symbol of Roman power built with the spoils of the Great Jewish Revolt. But as the empire grew, so too did its vulnerabilities. Its vastness made it a target, and its fabulous wealth became a magnet for those who sought to claim it for themselves. In the slow, turbulent decline of the Western Roman Empire, unimaginable fortunes were set adrift on the tides of war and chaos. Echoes of a sacked city. For 800 years, the city of Rome had been considered inviolable. But in the year 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. The Visigoths, led by their king Alaric, breached the city walls, and for 3 days, the heart of the Western world was at their mercy. Alaric had not set out to destroy Rome, but to be paid by it. After years of being denied land and gold, he unleashed his army on the richest city in the world. The historical sources speak of a methodical, though brutal, plundering. The Goths were Christians, and they largely spared the great churches of St. Peter and St. Paul, but the temples of the old Roman gods and the palaces of the senatorial class were stripped bare. They took portable wealth, gold and silver plates, jeweled furniture, silks, spices, and countless coins. The personal fortunes of Rome's elite, accumulated over generations, were hauled away in carts. The historian Jordanes, writing about a century later, recounts the most famous legend to emerge from this cataclysm. Following the sack, Alaric led his men south, intending to cross to Africa, but a storm destroyed his fleet, and soon after, the great king himself fell ill and died. According to the legend, his loyal followers diverted the waters of the Busento River in southern Italy. In the dry riverbed, they dug a grave fit for a king and buried Alaric with a portion of the most magnificent treasures taken from Rome. They then destroyed the dam, and the waters of the river rushed back, forever concealing the burial site and its untold riches. To ensure the secret was kept, every slave who had worked on the project was executed. For centuries, treasure hunters have searched for Alaric's tomb beneath the Busento. While the story has all the hallmarks of a romantic legend, it speaks to a fundamental truth. The vast wealth taken from Rome in 410 was dispersed, and its final destination remains one of history's great mysteries: the sacred menorah and the Vandals' prize. Of all the treasures held in Rome, perhaps none was more symbolic than the artifacts looted from the Second Temple of Jerusalem. After crushing the Great Jewish Revolt in 70 AD, the future Emperor Titus ransacked the Holy City. The spoils were paraded through Rome in a grand triumph, a moment immortalized in stone on the Arch of Titus, which still stands today. Carved into the marble, we can clearly see Roman soldiers carrying their most prized acquisitions: the golden table of shewbread, the silver trumpets, and most sacred of all, the seven-branched golden menorah. For nearly 4 centuries, these holy relics were kept in Rome's Temple of Peace. They were a powerful symbol of Roman victory and imperial might, but their fate became intertwined with the city's decline. In 455 AD, Rome was sacked for a second time, this time by the Vandals, a Germanic tribe that had established a powerful kingdom in North Africa. Their leader, Gaiseric, subjected the city to a meticulous 2-week-long plunder. Unlike the Visigoths, the Vandals had a fleet. They emptied the imperial palace and stripped the bronze tiles from the roof of the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Capitolinus. The 6th century historian Procopius explicitly states that among the treasures Gaiseric's fleet carried back to his capital, Carthage, were the sacred artifacts from the Temple of Jerusalem. For a time, the menorah and other relics resided in Africa. A generation later, the Byzantine general Belisarius conquered the Vandal kingdom and, according to Procopius, recovered the treasures, taking them to the new capital of the Roman world, Constantinople. Here, the trail grows cold. One account suggests that a wise Jewish elder warned the Byzantine emperor that the treasures brought ill fortune to any city that held them outside of Jerusalem, citing the fates of Rome and Carthage. Spooked by this prophecy, the emperor supposedly had the artifacts shipped to the Christian churches of Jerusalem. After that, they disappear from the historical record. Did they ever arrive? Were they hidden before the Persian and later Arab conquests of the city? Or did they never leave Constantinople at all, perhaps stored in a vault and forgotten, or melted down in a moment of imperial crisis? The ultimate fate of one of antiquity's most sacred objects remains unknown: the sunken palaces of Nemi. Not all Roman treasures were lost to invasion. Some were claimed by nature itself. In the volcanic hills outside Rome lies Lake Nemi, known in antiquity as the Mirror of Diana. In the 1920s, one of history's most astounding archaeological recoveries brought to light a treasure that had been lost for nearly 2 millennia. The tyrannical Emperor Caligula, who ruled from 37 to 41 AD, was known for his extreme extravagance. On the waters of this small sacred lake, he constructed 2 of the largest and most lavish ships built in the ancient world. They were not warships or cargo vessels, but floating palaces, dedicated to pleasure. For centuries, local fishermen snagged their nets on unseen obstructions in the lake. Stories abounded of a colossal sunken ship. Renaissance-era attempts to raise it failed, only succeeding in tearing off planks and retrieving a few artifacts. It wasn't until the late 1920s that the Italian dictator, Benito Mussolini, ordered an audacious feat of engineering. He had an ancient Roman emissary, an underground water conduit, repaired and used it to slowly drain the lake. In late 1943, as the tide of the war turned, the room was packed away once more. And it is at this point that its trail goes cold. In early 1945, the city of Königsberg was firebombed by the Allies and then stormed by the Red Army in a brutal final battle. The castle was left a smoldering ruin. The Amber Room had vanished. What happened to it? This remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of World War II. The most mundane and perhaps most likely theory is that the crates were still in the castle's cellar and were incinerated in the fires that raged after the bombing raids. Another prominent theory suggests the room was loaded onto a ship, possibly the German passenger liner Wilhelm Gustloff, which was sunk in the Baltic Sea by a Soviet submarine with colossal loss of life. Yet another posits that the crates were moved out of the city and hidden in one of the many secret mines or bunkers in the region. For over 75 years, the search has continued, fueled by eyewitness accounts, cryptic documents, and the occasional discovery of a single fragment of a mosaic believed to be from the original room. The mystery is a stark reminder that even in our modern world, with all its technology and record-keeping, priceless treasures can still disappear without a trace in the fog of war. In 2003, a stunning recreation of the Amber Room, the product of decades of work by Russian artisans, was finally unveiled in the Catherine Palace. It stands as a monument to what was lost, a legacy that, even if its physical substance is gone forever, refuses to be forgotten. Final conclusion. The stories we have explored, from the golden death mask of an Egyptian pharaoh to the ghost fleets of the Spanish Main, are threads in a single, vast human tapestry. They are tales of ambition, power, faith, greed, and ultimately, loss. They reveal a fundamental truth about civilization. What is built can be broken, what is gathered can be scattered, and what is treasured can be lost. The Caesars of Rome, the Sultans of Constantinople, the emperors of the Inca, and the Knights of the Temple all believed their power was absolute and their legacies were secure. Yet time, war, and nature proved them wrong. In the violent collapse of their worlds, fortunes beyond measure slipped through the grasp of history, becoming whispers, legends, and tantalizing clues in an epic detective story. Today, the quest continues. Archaeologists in Egypt probe the sands for a queen's lost tomb. Marine explorers scan the seabed for the glint of Spanish silver. Historians in Europe hunt for clues in centuries-old documents. This enduring search is driven by something far more profound than the mere pursuit of wealth. It is a quest for connection. To find a lost artifact is to shake hands with the past. To uncover a hidden hoard is to solve a mystery left by those who came before us, to read the final missing chapter of their story. The true treasure, then, is not the object itself, but the journey of discovery, the tireless pursuit of knowledge, and the human drive to reclaim the legacies that have been swallowed by the silence of the ages. While countless treasures may still lie hidden beneath our feet and in the depths of our oceans, the stories they have generated, the legends, the maps, the enduring mysteries, have become a part of our shared heritage. For in the end, it is not the gold we truly seek, but the ghosts of the worlds that created it. As the waters receded, an incredible sight was revealed. Two massive ship hulls emerged from the mud. The larger of the two was over 70 meters long and 24 meters wide. These were technological marvels. They had lead-sheathed hulls to prevent damage from shipworms, sophisticated piston pumps for bilge water, and even ball bearings to support rotating statues. Their decks were paved with marble and intricate mosaics. They were adorned with bronze statues, gilded tiles, and all the luxuries of an imperial villa. The ships were painstakingly moved to a specially constructed museum on the shore. They were a breathtaking testament to the limitless power and wealth of a Roman emperor. But their story ends in tragedy. During the final chaotic days of World War II in Italy, on the night of May 31, 1944, the museum came under artillery fire. A fire broke out, and by the morning, the two irreplaceable ships had been reduced to ashes and a few charred timbers. The treasure of Lake Nemi had been found, only to be lost again, this time forever. The fall of Rome in the West was not an end, but a transformation. As Europe splintered, the legacy of the Caesars, along with a vast portion of its wealth and cultural heritage, was carried eastward to a city that would become the beacon of civilization for the next 1,000 years, the Golden Court of Byzantium. When the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great founded his new capital on the site of the old Greek town of Byzantium, he called it Nova Roma, New Rome. History would remember it as Constantinople. Protected by the sea on 3 sides and fortified by the most formidable defensive walls ever built, this city was destined to become the richest in the world. For a millennium, Constantinople was the heart of the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman world. Its strategic location at the crossroads of Europe and Asia made it the nexus of global trade. Spices, silks, furs, and gems flowed into its markets. Its emperors ruled as absolute autocrats, surrounded by a level of pomp and ceremony designed to awe all who witnessed it. The imperial treasury, housed within the sprawling Great Palace complex, contained reserves of gold and priceless objects accumulated over centuries. Foreign visitors were left speechless by the opulence. Liutprand of Cremona, a 10th-century ambassador, described the emperor's throne room, where a golden tree was filled with gem-encrusted mechanical birds that sang. Golden lions flanked the throne, and at the pull of a lever, they would roar and beat the ground with their tails. This was wealth weaponized as propaganda, designed to project an image of divine and unshakable power. The churches of the city were even more magnificent. The Hagia Sophia, the Cathedral of Holy Wisdom, was the largest and most splendid church in Christendom. Its dome seemed to float above the city, and its interior was a glittering universe of gold mosaics, marble, and sacred relics. The city's monasteries and private chapels held a staggering collection of Christian artifacts, said to include the crown of thorns and multiple pieces of the true cross. But this immense concentration of wealth would ultimately prove to be an irresistible temptation: the betrayal of the Fourth Crusade. The single greatest catastrophe to befall Constantinople did not come from its traditional enemies to the east, but from its fellow Christians in the west. In the year 1204, the armies of the Fourth Crusade, originally destined for Egypt, were diverted. Through a series of complex political intrigues and financial debts owed to their Venetian allies, the Crusaders turned their attack on the greatest Christian city in the world. After a short siege, the Crusaders breached the walls and a 3-day sack of unimaginable brutality and greed ensued. It was a methodical asset stripping of a civilization. The contemporary Byzantine historian Nicetas Choniates watched in horror and wrote of crusaders who smashed the silver and gold altar of the Hagia Sophia to pieces, loading the fragments onto mules. They tore down the great silk curtains and hacked priceless icons from their frames. Every church, every monastery, and every palace was ransacked. Thousands of years of Roman and Greek art, including magnificent bronze statues that had adorned the city since its founding, were pulled down and melted for coin. Reliquaries were broken open, the holy relics inside discarded while the jeweled containers were seized. The city's libraries, containing irreplaceable manuscripts from the ancient world, were put to the torch. The spoils were immense. An official accounting, though likely an underestimate, stated that 900,000 silver marks were divided between the Venetians and the Crusaders, a sum many times the annual income of any European kingdom. Much of the loot found its way back to Western Europe, enriching cities like Venice. The most famous of these stolen treasures are the 4 bronze horses of St. Mark. These magnificent life-sized statues, once part of a sculpture group in the Hippodrome of Constantinople, were taken by the Venetians and placed atop their basilica. They stand there today, a silent, beautiful testament to one of history's most devastating acts of plunder. The sack of 1204 was a mortal wound from which the Byzantine Empire never recovered. The wealth of 1,000 years was scattered, and while many looted objects now reside in Western museums, countless other treasures, relics, manuscripts, and imperial regalia vanished completely in the chaos. The legacy of the sultans. In 1453, Constantinople fell for the last time. This time, to the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II. He made the city the capital of his own burgeoning empire, which would come to dominate the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Europe. The city, now known as Istanbul, entered a new golden age. The Ottoman sultans became the new masters of this global crossroads. Like the Byzantines before them, they accumulated vast wealth through conquest, trade, and taxation. The center of this power and riches was the Topkapi Palace, a sprawling complex overlooking the Bosphorus Strait. For 4 centuries, Topkapi was the administrative and residential heart of the Ottoman Empire. Its imperial treasury held a collection that rivaled any in the world. Gifts from foreign monarchs, spoils of war, and masterworks crafted by the finest artisans of the empire filled its vaults. Much of this incredible collection survives today in the Topkapi Palace Museum, giving us a direct window into the staggering wealth of the sultans. It holds priceless artifacts like the 86-carat spoonmaker's diamond and the legendary Topkapi dagger, adorned with 3 enormous emeralds. But the collection on display, as breathtaking as it is only what was officially accounted for. An empire that lasted for 600 years, with a succession of 36 sultans, inevitably has its share of lost fortunes and hidden hoards, lost not in a single cataclysm, but through intrigue, rebellion, and the slow march of time. The hidden caches of the Janissaries. For much of Ottoman history, the elite military corps known as the Janissaries were the most powerful force in the empire. They were the Sultan's personal troops, a fearsome and disciplined infantry that secured Ottoman victories on countless battlefields. Their power made them wealthy, but it also made them a threat. More than once they revolted, dethroning and even killing sultans who dared to cross them. By the early 19th century, Sultan Mahmud II recognized that this entrenched power block was an obstacle to modernization. In 1826, in an event known as the Auspicious Incident, he turned his new loyal artillery units on the Janissary barracks. The corps was brutally crushed and officially disbanded. Its members were hunted down and executed throughout the empire. This sudden, violent end to the Janissaries gave birth to enduring legends of hidden treasure. Over generations, the Janissaries had accumulated vast fortunes, not just as individuals, but as regiments. This wealth, gold coins, silver, and jewels, was often stored in their barracks or in private residences around Istanbul. As the Sultan's forces closed in, it is said that many Janissaries hid their life savings, burying caches of coins in cellars, dropping sacks of gold down wells, or walling them up in secret compartments, fully expecting to return for them once the danger had passed. For most, that day never came. For nearly 200 years since, stories have circulated in Istanbul of lucky discoveries. A construction crew digging a new foundation unearths a clay pot filled with Ottoman gold coins. A family renovating an old house finds a small fortune tucked behind a loose stone. While many of these tales may be folklore, they are rooted in the historical reality of a wealthy and powerful organization that was wiped out almost overnight. It is almost certain that somewhere beneath the bustling streets of modern Istanbul, forgotten Janissary hordes still wait in the dark. The sunken fleet of Lepanto. On October 7, 1571, one of the largest naval battles in history took place in the waters off western Greece. The Battle of Lepanto saw the Ottoman fleet clash with the combined naval forces of the Holy League, a Christian coalition led by Spain and Venice. The result was a catastrophic defeat for the Ottomans. Over 200 of their galleys were sunk or captured. An Ottoman galley was far more than just a warship. It was a mobile administrative and financial center. Each vessel carried the pay chests for its soldiers and sailors, typically chests filled with gold axes and silver coins. High-ranking officers and commanders also brought their personal wealth and valuables with them on campaign. When the fleet was annihilated in the Gulf of Patras, this immense fortune went down with it. The Holy League salvaged what it could in the immediate aftermath, but recovering treasure from sunken wooden ships in the 16th century was a nearly impossible task. The vast majority of the wrecks settled on the seabed, their contents scattered and slowly covered by silt. Modern marine archaeologists view the waters near Lepanto as one of the world's richest potential sites for underwater discovery. The challenges are immense. The Gulf is deep, and centuries of sediment have hidden the wreckage. But with advanced sonar and submersibles, the possibility of locating the remains of this lost fleet is very real. Each galley is a potential time capsule, holding not only chests of gold and silver coins, but cannons, personal effects, and a wealth of historical information about the empire at its height. The sunken payrolls of Lepanto represent one of the largest concentrations of lost Ottoman wealth lying in a single identifiable location. The treasures of the Ottoman sultans are but one chapter in this epic tale of lost wealth. The legacies of these empires are etched not only in stone and manuscript, but in the enduring question of what still lies buried beneath the earth and sea. As we continue our journey, we leave the familiar shores of the Mediterranean and cast our gaze further back in time, to an even older civilization, one whose entire philosophy was built around safeguarding treasures for eternity. We travel to the land of the Nile, to the kingdom of the pharaohs, the eternal wealth of Egypt. For 3 millennia, ancient Egypt stood as one of the world's most enduring and powerful civilizations. Its wealth, drawn from the fertile banks of the Nile, from conquered lands in Nubia and the Levant, and from extensive trade networks, was legendary. But Egyptian wealth was fundamentally different from that of Rome or Constantinople. It was not merely for displaying power in this life, but for equipping the dead for the next. The Egyptian belief in the afterlife was absolute. The soul, or Ka, needed its earthly possessions to navigate the underworld and live in eternal comfort. Tombs were not just graves. They were eternal houses, filled with everything a person would need: furniture, food, weapons, chariots, and, for the pharaohs, unimaginable quantities of gold. Gold, with its incorruptible sheen, was believed to be the flesh of the gods, the ultimate substance for guaranteeing eternal life. The most famous repository for this pharaonic wealth is the Valley of the Kings, a desolate, sun-scorched canyon on the west bank of the Nile, opposite modern Luxor. For 500 years, during the height of Egypt's power in the New Kingdom, this was the secret burial ground for its greatest rulers, pharaohs like Thutmose III, Seti I, and Ramesses the Great. Their tombs were elaborate subterranean structures, cut deep into the rock and protected by hidden entrances and decoy passages. Yet despite these precautions, nearly every tomb was systematically looted in antiquity, their treasures melted down and recycled, their royal mummies often desecrated in the process. For centuries, archaeologists believed that nothing could have survived the ancient tomb robbers. That was until 1922. The discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter changed everything. Tutankhamun was a minor pharaoh who ruled for only a decade and died young. Yet his tomb, small and hastily prepared, was found almost completely intact. The sheer volume and splendor of the artifacts crammed within its chambers stunned the world. A solid gold inner coffin, a magnificent golden death mask, gilded chariots, jewel-encrusted thrones, and over 5,000 other objects. The discovery provided a tantalizing glimpse into pharaonic burial practices, and it immediately raised a monumental question. If this was the treasure of a boy king, what riches must have accompanied a long-reigning, powerful pharaoh like Ramesses II to his grave? Thou Though his mummy was found, his tomb had been plundered. The vast treasures that were once buried with him are lost forever, dispersed into the stream of history. Yet the Valley of the Kings, and indeed all of Egypt, may still hold profound secrets. The quest for two legendary tombs. Among the many lost treasures of the ancient world, few have ignited the imagination quite like the lost tombs of Alexander the Great and Queen Cleopatra. They are the final, missing resting places of two of history's most iconic figures. After his death in Babylon in 323 BC, Alexander the Great's body became an object of immense political importance. His generals fought over his empire and his legacy. Initially, his body was to be transported back to Macedonia, but one of his cleverest generals, Ptolemy, hijacked the funeral procession and brought the great conqueror's remains to Egypt. Eventually, Alexander was interred in a magnificent tomb in the heart of the city he founded, Alexandria. Ancient historians described his body being placed first in a golden sarcophagus, which was later replaced with one made of glass or rock crystal. For centuries, his tomb was a site of pilgrimage, visited by Roman emperors like Julius Caesar and Augustus. The last reliable historical account of a visit was by the Roman Emperor Caracalla in 215 AD. After that, in the chaos of the late Roman period, with its civil wars, earthquakes, and tidal waves that reshaped the city, the location of the tomb vanished from memory. Today, the search for Alexander's tomb is one of archaeology's holy grails. Is it buried deep beneath the bustling modern city of Alexandria? Was it destroyed centuries ago? Or could it be hidden elsewhere, perhaps spirited away for safekeeping? Despite countless theories and searches, no trace has ever been found. A similar mystery surrounds the tomb of the last pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra VII. After her defeat at the hands of Octavian and her famous suicide in 30 BC, the Roman historian Plutarch states that she was buried with her lover, Mark Antony, in a grand mausoleum she had been building for herself. Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, reportedly granted her final wish to be entombed with Antony. Like Alexander's, her tomb was likely in or near Alexandria, but its location is unknown. In recent years, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has led an intensive search at a temple site called Taposiris Magna, about 30 miles west of Alexandria. The theory is that Cleopatra, identifying with the goddess Isis, may have arranged for her burial in a temple dedicated to her. Excavations there have uncovered a network of tunnels, tombs of nobles, and coins bearing her image, but the queen's final resting place remains elusive. To find the tombs of Alexander or Cleopatra would be to recover more than just gold or artifacts. It would be to find the final physical link to two people who irrevocably shaped the course of Western history. Our journey now takes us east, from the sands of Egypt to the vast highlands of Persia, home to an empire that rivaled Rome in its scale and amassed wealth that made even the pharaohs seem modest. Persia and the King of Kings. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great, was the largest the world had yet seen. Stretching from the Balkans to the Indus Valley, it was a superpower of immense diversity and incredible riches. Its great kings, like Darius and Xerxes, ruled over a sophisticated system of provinces, each of which paid enormous annual tributes in gold and silver. This river of wealth flowed to the imperial centers, Susa, Persepolis, and the summer capital, Ecbatana. It was this seemingly infinite treasure that drew the avarice of the West, culminating in the invasion of Alexander the Great. When Alexander defeated the Persian army and marched into its heartland, he captured treasuries on a scale that dwarfed all previous conquests. The ancient historian Arrian records that at Susa, Alexander seized some 50,000 talents of silver, that's roughly 1,300 metric tons. At Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, he found an even greater prize, 120,000 talents. The amount of wealth was so staggering that Alexander reportedly needed 10,000 pairs of mules and 5,000 camels just to transport the treasure from Persepolis alone. This was the accumulated wealth of the world's greatest empire over 2 centuries. Alexander systematically looted it, using the vast funds to pay his army and finance his continued campaigns. Most of the priceless metalwork, the intricate statues and golden furnishings described by Greek historians, was unceremoniously melted down into standardized coins to be more easily distributed. The conquest represented the single greatest transfer of wealth in ancient history. But it did not all end up in the pockets of Alexander's soldiers. Crossing another ocean, we journey to a world untouched by Rome or Persia, a continent where gold held a different meaning, and where the clash of 2 civilizations would give rise to some of the most enduring and tragic tales of lost treasure in human history. The Golden Empires of the Americas. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Americas in the early 16th century, they found civilizations with social structures, architectural traditions, and artistic achievements that rivaled their own. For the empires of the Aztecs in Mexico and the Incas in Peru, gold and silver were not used for currency. They were divine substances, the sweat of the sun and the tears of the moon, used to create objects of profound spiritual and ritualistic significance for their gods and their rulers. To the Spanish, however, this gold meant only one thing: wealth beyond their wildest dreams. The ransom for a god-king. In 1532, a small band of roughly 170 Spanish soldiers led by Francisco Pizarro managed, through a combination of surprise, advanced weaponry, and deceit, to capture the supreme ruler of the Inca Empire, Atahualpa. The Inca Empire was the largest in the pre-Columbian Americas, a meticulously organized state stretching for thousands of miles along the Andes. And its Sapa Inca, Atahualpa, was considered a living god. Realizing his captor's lust for precious metals, the imprisoned Atahualpa made an astonishing offer. In exchange for his freedom, he would fill a large room, approximately 22 feet by 17 feet, once with gold, and the same room twice over with silver. Pizarro agreed. For weeks, a river of treasure flowed into the city of Cajamarca. Llama caravans arrived, laden with priceless Inca artifacts from across the empire. Temple walls were stripped of their gold panels. There were golden plates, life-sized statues of plants and animals crafted from pure gold, and intricate ceremonial objects. The Spanish were overcome with awe and then with greed. Instead of appreciating the incredible artistry, they ordered their smiths to melt almost everything down into uniform gold bars to be more easily divided. An immeasurable cultural heritage was destroyed forever, but the legend of lost treasure was born from betrayal. Despite the ransom being largely delivered, Pizarro, fearing an Inca uprising, had Atahualpa executed. Historical accounts and Inca tradition hold that upon hearing of their emperor's murder, Inca generals who were still leading treasure-laden caravans toward Cajamarca diverted their course. They took the remaining part of the ransom, perhaps as much as a third of the total, and hid it in a secret location, possibly in the treacherous Langanetes mountain range in modern Ecuador. For centuries, explorers have searched for the lost treasure of the Langanetes, an unimaginably vast fortune hidden by a people betrayed, waiting in a place from which few who have searched for it have ever returned. The treasure at the bottom of Lake Texcoco. A similar story of greed and loss unfolded a decade earlier in the heart of the Aztec Empire. The Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, was a wonder of the world, a city of canals and pyramids built on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. Its markets were rich, and its temples and the palace of its ruler, Moctezuma, were filled with gold. After initially being welcomed, the Spanish contingent led by Hernán Cortés took Moctezuma hostage and began to systematically loot the city. This ultimately provoked a furious Aztec rebellion. On the night of June 30th, 1520, known to the Spanish as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. They were forced to make a desperate fighting retreat from the city. Cortés ordered the captured Aztec treasure, an enormous quantity of gold bars, jewels, and artifacts, to be divided. The soldiers loaded themselves down with as much as they could carry. But as they tried to flee across the causeways connecting the island city to the mainland, they were ambushed by Aztec warriors. The narrow escape route became a scene of slaughter. The Spanish soldiers, weighed down by the very gold they refused to abandon, were easily cut down or pushed into the water where they sank without a trace. The Spanish chronicler Bernal Diaz del Castillo, who was there that night, wrote that the canal was soon choked with the bodies of men and horses who were sacrificed to the god of war. Along with them went Moctezuma's treasure. Hundreds of soldiers and tons of gold were lost in the waters of Lake Texcoco that night. Cortés and a handful of survivors escaped, but the fortune was gone. Although Cortés later returned with reinforcements and conquered the Aztec Empire, the treasure of La Noche Triste was never recovered. Much of Lake Texcoco has since been drained and built over to create modern-day Mexico City. But somewhere, buried deep beneath the streets and subways of one of the world's largest cities, lies a king's ransom in Aztec gold, lost in a single night of panicked, deadly ambition. Conclusion. From the riverbeds of Italy to the secret valleys of the Andes, the stories of lost legacies follow a familiar pattern. Great empires, through power and conquest, accumulate wealth on a scale almost beyond modern comprehension. But no empire is eternal. In the crucible of their decline, through civil war, invasion, or rebellion, these vast fortunes are set adrift. Palaces are burned, treasuries are plundered, and sacred artifacts are stripped of their meaning and melted into bullion. The menorah of Jerusalem, the golden lions of Byzantium, the ransom of Atahualpa, these were more than just objects of material value. They were the symbols of their civilizations, embodiments of faith, power, and cultural identity. Their loss represents a tear in the fabric of our collective history. The search for these treasures continues, driven not only by the allure of gold, but by a deeper human need to connect with our past. Each new discovery, whether a few Roman coins found in a field or a single artifact pulled from a shipwreck, brings a lost world into sharper focus. The true treasure is not the gold itself, but the stories it tells and the historical puzzles it might finally solve. These lost legacies remind us of the impermanence of power and the enduring power of myth. They lie waiting in the dark, silent witnesses to the rise and fall of empires, holding the secrets of worlds we can now only begin to imagine. And yet, our quest for lost legacies is not confined to the vaults of great empires or the tombs of forgotten kings. Sometimes the most enigmatic disappearances of wealth are linked not to nations, but to powerful organizations that operated beyond the reach of any single crown, entities that accumulated fortunes so vast, their loss would echo through centuries of folklore and speculation. Few were more powerful or more mysterious than the Knights Templar. The bankers of God, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, known to history as the Knights Templar, were founded in the early 12th century. Their initial purpose was humble, to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. But over the next 2 centuries, they evolved into the most formidable organization in Christendom. They were elite warriors, but they were also brilliant innovators. They created a sophisticated multinational network of finance that is often cited as the world's first international banking system. A pilgrim could deposit money at the Templar Preceptory in London and receive a letter of credit, which he could then redeem for cash in Jerusalem, eliminating the dangerous need to carry large sums of money on the road. Through this system, combined with vast land donations from nobles across Europe and spoils from the Crusades, the Templars became phenomenally wealthy. They owned properties from Ireland to Armenia. They were lenders to popes and kings, financing wars and propping up entire economies. Their central treasury, located at the massive Templar compound in Paris, was effectively the reserve bank of France, holding the fortunes of the French crown alongside their own. But their power and their secrecy made them targets, and their greatest debtor would prove to be their greatest enemy. King Philip IV of France was ambitious, ruthless, and deeply in debt to the Templar order. He saw their immense, untaxed wealth as the solution to his financial woes, and their secretive, autonomous nature as a threat to his absolute authority. In a meticulously planned dawn raid on Friday, October 13, 1307, Philip's men simultaneously arrested every Templar in France. They were charged with heresy, tortured into giving false confessions, and their order was brutally suppressed. King Philip got his hands on their vast land holdings and properties. But the one thing he coveted most, the legendary liquid treasure of the Templars, the mountains of gold and silver stored in the Paris temple, was gone. When his men broke into the vaults, they found them all but empty. This is the origin of one of history's most enduring treasure legends. What happened to the Templar hoard? Historical accounts are silent, but legends have filled the void. One of the most popular theories centers on the Templar fleet. The Knights maintained a large naval force, with major ports like La Rochelle on the French Atlantic coast. The legend holds that in the days just before the arrests, a series of wagons left the Paris temple under the cover of darkness. They were laden with the order's treasure and traveled to La Rochelle, where they were loaded onto Templar ships, which then set sail, disappearing into the Atlantic fog, never to be seen again. Where could they have gone? Theories range from Scotland to create a new base with their ally Robert the Bruce, to Portugal, where the Templar order was simply rebranded as the Order of Christ, or even across the Atlantic to North America, a full century and a half before Columbus. While there is no definitive proof for any of these claims, the historical context is compelling. The Templars were a highly organized, secretive group with immense logistical capabilities and advanced knowledge of the king's intentions. It is highly plausible that they would have taken steps to move their portable wealth to safety. Somewhere, whether at the bottom of the sea, buried in a Scottish field, or dispersed through the European economy, the great lost treasure of the Knights Templar remains a testament to the swift and total collapse of an immense power. Fleets of silver, graveyards of gold. The destruction of the Templars and the disappearance of their wealth illustrates a key principle of lost fortunes. But perhaps the most consistent and spectacular losses of treasure in history came not from planned concealment, but from catastrophe at sea. And no one moved more treasure by sea than the Spanish Empire. Following their conquest of the Americas, the Spanish discovered seemingly inexhaustible sources of precious metals, particularly the massive silver mines of Potosí in modern-day Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico. To transport this fortune back to Spain, they established the legendary Spanish treasure fleets, the Flota de Indias. For over 200 years, convoys of heavily armed galleons, laden with silver bullion, gold bars, emeralds from Colombia, and pearls from Venezuela, sailed a perilous route across the Atlantic. This river of silver funded Spain's European wars and transformed the global economy. It also created an irresistible target. It drew in pirates and privateers from England, France, and Holland, leading to epic naval battles in the Caribbean. But the greatest threat to the treasure fleets was not pirates. It was nature itself. The galleons were clumsy, top-heavy vessels, and their route took them directly through the Hurricane Alley of the Florida Straits. A single storm could wipe out an entire fleet, sending centuries of a continent's wealth to the ocean floor. One such disaster created one of the most famous sunken treasures in history. In September of 1622, a fleet of 28 Spanish ships departed from Havana, bound for Spain. The prize of the fleet was the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, a galleon packed to the gunwales with a spectacular cargo. According to its meticulously detailed manifest, the Atocha was carrying over 24 tons of silver bullion, in the form of 1,038 ingots, 180,000 silver coins, 125 gold bars, and a contraband hoard of uncut emeralds from the Muzo mines of Colombia. Just 2 days out of port, the fleet sailed into a ferocious hurricane. The ships were scattered. The Atocha was lifted high on a storm surge and then smashed down onto a coral reef, sinking so quickly that only 5 of its 265 passengers and crew survived. The immense treasure was lost in 55 feet of water, and subsequent salvage attempts failed as another hurricane buried the wreck further beneath the shifting sands. For 3.5 centuries, the Atocha was the stuff of legend. That was until 1985, when after a 16-year search, the American treasure hunter Mel Fisher and his team located the mother lode. What they found was beyond comprehension: piles of silver bars, chests overflowing with coins, solid gold chains, and a dazzling array of brilliant green emeralds. The recovered treasure was valued at over $450 million, and much of the wreck remains to be explored. The story of the Atocha is a powerful reminder that the legendary treasures lost to the sea are not always mere legends. In the deep waters of the Caribbean and beyond, thousands of other galleons, pirate ships, and merchant vessels still lie in their watery graves, their holds filled with the silent, waiting riches of a bygone age. Yet not all lost treasures were from empires or vast organizations. Some of the most enduring legends are tied to single, infamous individuals, men who carved their names into history and left behind mysteries that continue to tantalize us today. The myth of the pirate hoard. The romantic image of the pirate burying a chest of gold on a deserted island, marking the spot with an X on a secret map, is a powerful and iconic one. In reality, it was an incredibly rare practice. Most pirates operated on a no-prey, no-pay system, dividing their loot immediately after a successful raid. They were far more likely to spend their gold on shore in a drunken spree than to bury it in the ground. However, the entire trope of buried pirate treasure can be traced back to one specific historical case, that of Captain William Kidd. Kidd began his career not as a pirate, but as a respectable privateer, commissioned by the King of England to hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean. But the line between privateering and piracy was thin, and Kidd crossed it, capturing several ships that were not legitimate targets. Now a wanted man, he sailed back toward the Americas in 1699, hoping to clear his name. Knowing he would be arrested, he took a precautionary measure. He sailed to Gardiner's Island, off the coast of Long Island, New York, and entrusted a portion of his treasure to the island's owner, John Gardner, for safekeeping. This treasure was real, and after Kidd's capture, it was recovered by the authorities. The inventory list is a matter of public record and includes gold dust, bars of silver, Spanish pieces of 8, rubies, and diamonds. Kidd was sent to London, tried, and hanged for piracy. But it was what he said at the gallows that ignited a legend. Kidd claimed that if his life was spared, he could lead the authorities to a much larger treasure, valued at £100,000, that he had left behind in the West Indies. His plea was ignored, but the idea of a vast undiscovered second treasure took root. In the decades and centuries that followed, the story grew. Treasure hunters began to believe that Kidd had buried caches of gold up and down the eastern seaboard of North America, in the Caribbean, and even on islands in the South China Sea. Robert Louis Stevenson directly drew inspiration from the legend of Captain Kidd for his novel Treasure Island, forever cementing the idea of buried pirate gold and treasure maps in the popular imagination. While the chances of finding another vast hoard from Kidd are slim, his story proves that sometimes the most powerful legacies are not made of gold, but of the stories they inspire. The Priceless Room of Amber. Our final journey takes us into the modern era, to a treasure lost not in antiquity, but in the chaos of the 20th century's greatest conflict. It was not a hoard of gold coins or a chest of jewels, but a single, breathtaking work of art. A masterpiece of such opulence and beauty, it was dubbed the eighth wonder of the world, the Amber Room. Construction of the room began in 1701 in Prussia. It was a complete chamber. Its walls fashioned from over 6 tons of meticulously carved amber panels, backed with gold leaf and adorned with intricate mosaics and mirrors. In 1716, as a symbol of the alliance between Prussia and Russia, King Frederick William I gifted the spectacular room to Tsar Peter the Great. It was installed in the Catherine Palace outside St. Petersburg, where Russian masters expanded it further, until it covered more than 55 square meters. For nearly 200 years, it served as a dazzling reception chamber for the Tsars, its amber walls glowing like trapped sunlight. Its fate was sealed in June of 1941 when Nazi Germany launched its invasion of the Soviet Union. As German troops closed in on St. Petersburg, then called Leningrad, palace curators attempted to disassemble and evacuate the room. But the aging amber had become brittle and started to crumble. They made the fateful decision to try and hide it, covering the precious walls with wallpaper, hoping the German soldiers would mistake it for an ordinary room. The deception failed. The Nazis knew exactly what they were looking for. They carefully dismantled the Amber Room in 36 hours, packed it into 27 crates, and shipped it west to Königsberg Castle in what was then East Prussia, the historical home of amber craftsmanship. There it was reassembled and put on display for 2 years, a potent symbol of German conquest.